The relation between Princeton Future and the town and its government has been, I think, somewhere between being ignored and occasionally hostile. I'm interested in the process. What we've seen is wonderful and as good as plans can possibly be.
But we'd like to have you comment on on this. I mean, Tony just gave us an excellent presentation, and we will have another session on November 18th, excuse me, where we might be able to deal with more content and more questions. But for today, what do you think? What do you think? Comment back here? I don't.
Hi, I'm Bill Moran, a resident of the Golden Circle since 1980. Born here, actually. Just a word of encouragement. I was here, can't remember how many years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when they had the charrette in this room in the old library for this, what you see out here, and it happened. So,
And here it is, yes.
and it wasn't sure back then.
Great. He made a very good point. We talked about it years and years ago when Marvin Reed was mayor, and here it is, and we are all enjoying it, and isn't that wonderful? Okay, other points. How about
Yep.
who's good?
Just remember to talk into the mic, then it works better.
Thanks, Tony. That was great. There are a couple of bookends that I'd love to posit. One is kind of a question. The other is a request. The question, and it's a rhetorical one, is: are we growing into a large town or a small city? This is kind of to your question about psyche. I've kind of thought of it as identity. And does that matter? Don't need an answer, but how does that impact everything that you just spoke about for an hour and a half? Number two is, at the other end of it, is that as critical as all of that imagining is, the rubber really hits the road when we start to get specific about plans. And I'm thinking about Jugtown, where I think there was a kerfuffle, an unnecessary one. Had those kind of specific locations been stress tested, much better. So we've got an overlay, an affordable housing overlay, and we've got a historic district that are coming right up against each other. And how that could have been laid out a little bit differently would have made a huge impact. So at the one hand, a very kind of basic question about our psyche and our identity, and then at the other end of it is stress testing these things, because that's really where everything grinds to a halt.
I'd like to start with a little bit of an answer to your first question. By the year 2080, the world will have 10 billion people. We now have about 8 billion. That's a lot more people. Now by 2035, we'll have a significant number more. And Tony made the point brilliantly at the beginning that change happens. It happens. I mean, one problem is we actually aren't having enough babies. we're kind of worried about the demographic problem of not being able to keep our society and our economy humming along with new people. But new people are coming. So to your point, change will happen. And to Tony's point, it's a question of how will we direct it. Now, to your second question, which was, again?
Stress testing.
Stress testing, the Jugtown example.
Which I recognize is not part of this particular conversation.
Right.
Just, again, they're bookends.
to the vision.
Tony, do you have any comments on that?
Those, I'm sorry, yeah, I mean, both your questions are really excellent, though. But the thing that I think is important is that both planners need to develop, and architects, who probably do much of this stuff, need to develop a kind of these conceptual ideas that start again with the doodles and can now move really easily into AI to be able to quote unquote stress test them, if you want to call it stress testing. And then, you know, they got the programs that say, how many square feet of this, how many sheetrock nails do you need? That's all out there now. So things can be stress tested, but they've got to be stress tested, in my opinion, first with a vision of what the area wants to be, and B, then developing what I call really simple three-dimensional models of what it could be. And now we can do several variations of what three-dimensional things could actually be. And I think that's really needed and necessary. And it cannot be just, I mean, again, the number of planners, and you know, Jim is sitting in the back and certainly could testify to that. There's so many planners who just have no capability of three-dimensionality. They just don't. They just don't have that in their head. And I think it's very important, if they don't, then that the zoning code requires that you do this process before you submit any application. You don't come in with a completed application. You come in with a three-dimensional, four-dimensional plan to get preliminary approval before you begin to move through the whole process. So you need staff in order to do that. And you know, I don't know if Justin can handle all of that, but there definitely needs to be done. But the more important question is, what are we becoming? I think Princeton is becoming one of the more unique hybrids, probably in the United States. Okay? It has the potential. Number one, because it's got the #1 university. Clearly. Number two, it's got people who really want to preserve the edges and the green. Extraordinary. It's like English planning. But number three, the key is that in order to make a place really sustainable, it's got to be walkable. In order to walkable, you got to have places to walk to. You have to have things you want to buy. You have to be able to get around. Your kids need to go to school. So the little microcosm in the middle will become something special. Now, maybe I'm a little bit prejudiced on this because I've just spent 6 months living in a 1,000-year-old medieval town, which hasn't changed in 800 years. It just keeps growing, and people keep adapting, and keep adapting, and keep adapting, and keep adapting. But what's really cool about it is the pedestrianism. What's cool about it is the fact that there's a market. It's cool about it is that people know each other. Now, I don't know if this is a town or a city. I don't know what this is, but it's a place where really interesting people are, where really smart people are, and also where it's really, really, really interactive. So I would tend to think that it is a small suburban town with a very big university that is in the process of growing. And I think it's not going to grow negative. It's only going to, if this was implemented, half of this was implemented, it'd be one of the most unique college towns in the United States, in my opinion. So I don't know what that is, but I think it's really a super hybrid, cool, interesting town.
If we take Tony's point, visualize first, and then think about it, plan about it, and then make it happen. Okay, another, oop, microphone is coming.
Dan Rappaport on Princeton Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I have 2 questions for either Andrew or Tony. For your proposal about the Emerald Necklace, would there be linkage to the Delaware and Raritan Canal towpath in Kingston and the necklace in Lawrence and Hopewell, the Lawrence Hopewell Trail? And the second question is, a few years ago I heard a proposal from Tim Quinn about making the part of that would be Province Line Road that you can't use for anything now into a hiking and biking trail in honor of the 250th anniversary of the United States. is anyone supporting his efforts to try to do anything with that? Because I haven't heard anything since I've heard about it initially.
That's new to me. One of the things that
I
happened.
can answer one part
Yes,
of that
mhm.
for you. One of the nature trails that I've been building recently, or in the past actually, was a connection down Stony Brook that connects directly up with the Hopewell
Oh.
side of things. And it comes down Stony Brook behind Edel Farm community. And then eventually there is a walk path where we can connect with the rest of the Stony Brook Trail that goes all the way over to 206 behind Hunt School. And those are trails that I built maybe a decade or more ago. And that will connect very easily. It's quite possible to make a serious connection there.
At an earlier meeting, we had a father and daughter who talked about doing a complete walk. There are a few little glitches in the complete walk at the moment, but it is almost there. So to your point, thank you for building those trails. Other questions?
Just one response to that. We had thought that we just didn't have time to do it. We had thought that after the 6th meeting that talked about the emerald necklace and all these people got up and talked, that, and maybe Justin already has it, I don't know, but there should be a very specific green map of this town.
Yes.
Very specific green map that then, and we even pushed it one step further. Now, Francoise, my wife, she's the biggest walker that I know. I mean, she's doing the 10 miles a day kind of stuff. And so she probably knows it as certainly better than I do, because I'm not that athletic as she is. But be that as it may, we had said what we would like to do is prepare a map that has all green spaces in town, but also including sidewalks, which means, can we create a kind of a lace drawing that would include all sidewalks? Because I think that the area between a sidewalk and a curb, I call it the parkway. I mean, not the Garden State Parkway, but the parkway, right? It has trees on it. So what does the tree plan look like for the town if we connected all the sidewalks together with all of the green spaces in town? What would that map look like? And how would people begin to use that map? So that's one of the things that has been on our back list. But again, we work for nothing. I mean, that was something that I kind of hoped that the town would do, or Clark Caton and Hintz would do, to be able to put that whole thing together. Is it possible? Absolutely. And I think it would be a very cool map when it was done. But then it would be, I mean, I think there's 10 years of green signs not on the street I just saw. I mean, the town there's new trees on our street, what have you. So I think connecting it all together would be just a fantastic thing, because it would make the town healthier, it would make it more sustainable, we would plant more trees, and people would be healthier.
Tony, we also need more bicycle paths. Just, you haven't mentioned that too much.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Kathy Knight, Jugtown resident. I want to thank you so much for this presentation. I really drunk the Kool-Aid in all these proposed developments, like they were just absolutely awesome. I just wanted to point out, though, that I was surprised that one of your goals doesn't include preserving some of the historical aspects of neighborhoods of Princeton. Because in your developments, you used, in general, underutilized areas, back parking lots. I was so into it. But I think it's really important that when we do allow development, we make sure we preserve our historic districts. And I just think that should be included as one of the goals, in my opinion.
This afternoon.
Awesome. That's great. And I agree with what Tom Pinio said about the Jugtown area. If you notice, the Harrison Street, Nassau is one of the transport areas. And right now, transit centers, and right now, with the new overlay, the new construction can all be 0 setbacks, and that won't work for that intersection. It's just a real problem there, and I just wanted to bring that up because it's come up many times. It's just, that's kind of a glitch in how the development's going, and really won't work for that area. I wanted to follow it up with just a quick question. I was just curious what the thought was for the percentage of affordable, the 20-80%. I was just curious. I know the Franklin Avenue development will be 50-50, and I'm just wondering if the Princeton Future people have thought about it and if they support the 20-80 for the inclusive development ratio or not. Thank you.
Tony, do you want to speak to that?
The 2080 is normal. That's the number that can work from a development perspective and what have you. Now, the Franklin Avenue one was different because the town owned the land. So if the land has to be acquired in some form or another, it's a very different thing. So any places, for instance, somebody said the salt lot, or the one that's, could be one that could be 50-50. That could be 50-50. There's others that where the town owns land could be 50-50. But a majority, in order to make developers, provide the housing, the formula has been for years 20% is low and moderate, and 80% is market rate. That seems to work. Now, it's a very tough thing. If there was some way to subsidize it, like one of the big donors would subsidize it, it's possible to have a greater amount of affordable housing. But in most cases, for instance, when we're thinking about half-level underground parking, we're going to get screamed at because it's going to be expensive, you can't do that. And of course, the great test is going to be what emerges from the Franklin Avenue site. That's going to be the big test. I mean, two tests I can see coming up. What's going to happen at the Franklin Avenue site? What's that going to look like and feel like? And where's the parking going to go? And the other is, the big test is Chambers Street, to see whether or not that's going to, because if Chambers Street goes with the parking on it, all is lost, in my opinion. But that's just me. I'm just negatively thinking about it. If the town can't step up to do that, then, where does it go? But anyway, it's just a test. We'll see what happens if it goes one way or the other. But I think the 20, although Sheldon and I disagree with this a lot, I think it's really difficult to think about doing 50-50 unless A, the land is owned by the town, or B, that it is subsidized in some form or another in order to be able to make that happen.
Thank you.
Well, that last point is very important, particularly on the Jugtown site, where the town does own a lot of that land and could be closer to a 50-50 development.
Or if we didn't have to put in as much parking, we could put in more units than we could. So there you go.
Mhm.
It's a way to
Correct.
nudge towards.
By the way, sorry, I gotta keep. The thing that's interesting about the transit system, and if we built a transit system, we could reduce the parking on every site by half. By half. And say, hey, listen, if an underground parking space costs $30,000 a piece, and you only have to build half of them, what do you do with the other 30,000? Well, you help subsidize the transit system. Or else, God bless it, if the university would run the transit system, you imagine what that could be? We could immediately reduce the total amount of parking in every one of these sites by half. By half. And that would be a godsend, not only to the development community, but keep the traffic off the street, et cetera, et cetera. But then people hop on the little bus and it just flips around town and it does what it needs to do. Anyway, that's a very important point.
Okay. Gentleman here against the wall in the white shirt.
Hi, my name is Danny Tenenbaum. I actually just recently moved here for a graduate program at the university. I'm originally from Montana, where I served in the state legislature, and I wrote a bunch of land use legislation with my colleagues there. And it was really interesting to see the sort of the state of affairs here in Princeton. I like being here in Princeton. We've only been here for a few months, my wife and my kids. But it does feel very much like a wealthy enclave, and I'm seeing evidence like all around town, just how the people who basically run the city tend to migrate in from Trenton, New Brunswick, more affordable areas, and then they go back home at night. And to me, that just seems extremely unsustainable and a black mark on the town that it functions that way. And I think one of the slides showed, the number of units that Princeton has to provide under its fair share requirement, which I think was a result of litigation, and they're continuing to fight, or they have fought it in the past. I think the vacancy rate here in Princeton is 1 or 2%, and to me, we can talk about design, and this is where housing should go, and this is where housing probably shouldn't go, but unless there's a plan to produce enough housing to really increase the vacancy rate to something healthier, more sustainable, like 5, ideally something like 8%, it's going to continue to be a wealthy enclave that's really just not a place where young families can move to, where middle-class people can live and contribute to the city. And so there were a few slides that said, we're going to focus on downtown. We're going to leave large swaths of the city for suburbia. And to me, I don't think that can be sustained. I think you got to do more than just allow ADUs in some of these neighborhoods that are currently very suburban. And the way we did it at the state level in Montana was that we just saw these conversations happening in the wealthy cities and towns of Montana, Whitefish, Bozeman, Missoula, and they were just never getting anywhere. People were debating things, people were proposing things, a lot of fancy graphs and master plans were being proposed, but nothing was actually happening on the ground in terms of updated zoning. And so we just said at the state legislature, bipartisan, it was almost unanimous, every single lot in a city where you can currently build a single family house, you have to also allow for basically 2 more units of housing, either a triplex or a duplex with an ADU, just legal by right. And we got a ton of blowback, but basically only from cities. Everyone else was like, this makes perfect sense. So we went beyond, we legalized mixed use throughout all commercial areas. We did a whole bunch of other stuff. My sense is, watching this presentation, if I were in the New Jersey State Legislature, and there's a guy in my program who is, I would just begin starting the conversation about state preemption, because it seems like the conversation is just going way too slowly and going development by development, all these battles happening, this is how many parking spaces are needed. I know that's a not popular thing among certain groups, but there's a whole bunch of people who would love to live in Princeton, but who are not in this room and who can't provide input, and there's just no room for them in this community. And to me, that's a huge failure.
Number one, we really need to hear your voice. Very helpful comments, and please come to other meetings and let's talk about this, because many of us, when we think about Montana, we think about Yellowstone and the fact that he doesn't want any development anywhere near his property. But as you say, you have hopefully a more enlightened legislature that is working on it. Rich, I'm remembering when you did a program a couple programs ago, you talked about the affordable housing number was something like $800,000 in Princeton. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I think the average household income was $160,000. And if you took a very, very dedicated buyer, a person who would stretch their budget to the ultimate, that person could afford maybe a $900,000 house, and there are none on the market. And to the point that Mr. Tannenbaum made, absolutely. We've been sitting here thinking, oh, are we going too fast? Are we going too fast? All this housing, oh no, we're not going fast enough. I would second your opinion.
Right, thank you, Rich.
Just one quick point. I'm living here in Princeton making less than $20,000 a year. And I'm currently building you probably the nicest park over in Herringtown Woods. I encourage you all to check it out. And the nature trails for the Emerald Triangle. And work with a lot of various environmental groups here in town. I thought I was going to be homeless. I rent. My landlady said, oh, time to go, a couple months ago. And there's just no options. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to a different state or moving somewhere. I couldn't find anything down here. So the importance, really, what I'm saying here is that if you like the idea of having people who build your Emerald Triangle, who will take care of your parks, your green spaces, that's people like me. And, nobody pays us very much money. Just enough. 90% of my income goes to rent. Yeah. And that doesn't leave a whole lot else. That's why I go out and spend all my time in the woods. It doesn't cost anything out there. But that's a real factor in such. I think Princeton, to your point, yeah, you're really housing here, affordable housing is, and access to it is just so important if you guys want to continue to have, the kind of town you have here. It requires some people like me.
Thank you for your testimony. Other comments?
Valerie.
So hi, I'm Valerie Haynes. For years, I've been a volunteer with Princeton Community Housing, which is a nonprofit that builds affordable housing in Princeton. And it's been doing it for over 50 years. It's really hard. Everything everybody has said. I'll just put in a couple things. One, we do have a 50% affordable, 50% market rate development in Princeton. It's called Briggs Farm. It was developed by Princeton Community Housing with assistance from the municipality, which was repaid over time. So it did not? Okay, like that, sorry. And it's thriving today. It's still thriving today. So there are half of the affordable units are for sale units that the town manages, and half are rental units that we own and manage. So that does exist, but you know, we haven't done another one like that. We just added 25 units at Princeton Community Village, again, with some assistance from the town. Of course, we own the land already. That made it more possible. We were able to, you know, refinance mortgage and do other things so we could raise the funds to do it. And that's renting up right now. But it's very slow, it's very incremental, and it could be so much better. In addition, I take issue with the 20% number because we really need a lot more than 20%. Moderate income, people who are eligible for subsidized housing as moderate income are people who make 40% of the median, right? So that's, no.
What's the number, Valerie?
I couldn't possibly tell you the numbers because they vary so much depending on the size of the household and all the other things. And they change periodically. They are adjusted, obviously. But you know, that's more than 20%. So, and we don't have that now. We don't have 20%. We have about 10% of our population in income restricted units in Princeton, which is good for a suburb. But it's not good enough. Right. So exactly, you know, exactly to your point. I live near some of those undeveloped preserved lands, and I would love to see trails that I could actually walk to, but that's not happening. We just keep acquiring more land. So, you know, I guess those are the main points I want to make at this moment. But, you know,
there's work to be done.
It's a lot of work to be done, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Valerie. Any other points?
I'll make a comment.
Okay,
Danny,
Sheldon.
welcome to town. What are you studying?
I'm in the public policy school.
Okay. Well, we need your help in this town. I'm a believer in 50-50 housing. We did it. We persuaded people on Franklin because the land was free. The reason, the largest reason that the land is so expensive in the town of Princeton, and we, in the year 2000, 60% of the teachers in our public schools lived in the borough or the township. Now that number's 0. And if you're talking about human ecology, which is what you're talking about in my view, this town needs to remain a town. That's the pressure. And I think we could do it with 50-50 housing. It's going to take knocking down the land cost in this town. And it's probably going to take a lot of money. I think we have a neighbor that could help us with that if we presented a town-wide proposal to be considered. Maybe you can help.
And in case you don't know, Sheldon Sturgis, who just spoke, is the founder of Princeton Future. Yes.
To follow up on that, I'm Linda Oppenheim. I'm also a member of Not in Our Town Princeton, which is an anti-racism organization. I think it's important to point out that Butler Tract is owned by the university, so they're the ones who are going to be doing the development. And someone who just left the School for Public and International Affairs, Matt Malechko, had proposed for the university to make that a land bank so that the land itself would not increase in cost and would allow affordable housing to be continued in perpetuity.
Oh, thank you.
Is that moving
Good.
forward?
Comment here, the lady?
I just have one quick question to follow up. Basically, I'm also affiliated with Princeton Community Housing. And has any consideration been given in the plans that were prepared for this wonderful presentation to the municipally owned land?
To the municipally owned land?
Yes, there are municipally owned sites.
Like the
that-
Salt Dome?
Yes.
Fire station.
Fire station, Salt Dome?
Yes.
So,
Parking lot, there's like 4 or 5.
a quick follow-up, I did see some variation in the 80-20 formula. How did you arrive at that? Because you went quickly over those
We didn't
slides.
really talk about that, did we, John?
No,
No,
it's just,
80-20
it's
Okay,
the normal
sorry.
state number that
Right.
has been used.
I thought I saw one.
The court
that
likes
was-
that number.
I thought I saw one that was 45. I could have been
No,
mistaken.
it's not.
It was very quick, thank you.
Okay.
But thank you very much for the presentation.
And the gentleman?
Just to follow up on some of the earlier comments, or the later comments actually, I do think we need to do like Minneapolis and like a lot of other towns in Montana has done to allow development on all parcels in Princeton, not preserve things for single family homes. I think that, might not go to maybe duplexes, triplexes would be great. We need more of that. But we really do need to try to develop, as Sheldon said and other people, this 50-50 thing to the extent we can. And again, with municipally owned lands and with the, I'm going to backtrack slightly. In terms of the Emerald Necklace, it's a great idea. I use all those parks, I love all those parks. I think we need to get them connected, we've got to preserve them. But I'm not sure that we should protect all green space in Princeton right now as long as we have adequate green space, because we might need some, if it's municipally owned, if it can help for affordable housing, we might need a little bit of that for the house, while still keeping the vast majority green. We need to use every way we can to provide for, at this point, not only a working class that I mentioned, but a middle class in Princeton. And at this point, there's a shrinking middle class in the market rates. That we used to have market rates in the 100,000, 200, 300,000 range. As somebody said, the minimum now is almost 800.
Yeah.
The median is what, 1.2 million or something? I don't know, but anyway, it's ridiculous. And so we do need to try to do this. And yes, it will grow the size of Princeton, but to the extent we can do more 50-50, and maybe even more 100%. I like the 50-50 best, but maybe some more 100% to try to do that and then figure out something for the missing middle. Thank you.
One of the things I'd like to remind you of is Princeton Future talks about participatory democracy. It's hard to say. It's hard to do, too. It means you have to show up. It means you go to meetings. It means you talk to the people who have the power to make change. It means you vote. And that's how change really happens. And one of the things that we're hoping to do with sessions like this is to give you the background you need to ask good questions, to make recommendations, and to show up. So that's important. Question up here.
Hi, Kathy. I'm Sam Bunting, and it's more of a comment than a question. I apologize, I came in late because I had to do taxis to ballet and things like that, swimming classes this morning. So I don't know exactly what you've said, but we do have a master plan rewrite going on right now. And very importantly, there is a major public open house on Wednesday of this week, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Town Hall at 400 Witherspoon Street. And if you like some of these great ideas and some of the great ideas which we've heard from Tony and in the room, you all need to come and stress to our planners and the consultants that these ideas need to go in the master plan. So just to follow up on your point about participatory democracy, the planners need to hear that you are excited about these ideas, because there is a point of view that nobody in Princeton wants any more apartment buildings. That point of view has been expressed. There is a point of view, coming back to your point about single-family housing, that we need to preserve single-family housing in the greatest extent of Princeton. And these points of view are informing the current master plan rewrite. And if you have some alternative ideas, such as those which Tony was talking about, please come and make sure that the planners and consultants are aware that you support those kinds of ideas. So that's happening this Wednesday, 4 to 7 p.m. at the town hall at 400 Wetherspoon Street. I'm bringing this up because I've been involved on the advisory committee for this master plan rewrite process. I don't know to what extent the full range of perspectives in Princeton have really gone into it, but I would hope that some of the people in this room would come out on Wednesday and make sure that those points are reinforced.
Thank you. I think we've come to the end of our time. Tony, we can't thank you enough for this wonderful work that you've done and the wonderful presentation. So thank you. There will be a next meeting on November 18th, and we may take up a few more of these issues. And you may want to take what you learned today to the municipal master plan meeting that's taking place over at Monument Hall, at noon. So you've got 25 minutes to walk over and it isn't pouring. Again, thank you so much for coming out, and have a wonderful but probably wet weekend. Thank you.